I can remember my father, who had a private pilot's licence on cirrus moths before the Tiger, operating out of Maylands, and would sort of run me through in the kitchen with a broomstick and a couple of bricks, I think, as pretend rudder pedals, sitting in a chair just like this. So it was something that I'd had forever. We went up with a RAF, or Qantas charter, in a 707. We went out of Sydney. We had a week's pre-embarkation leave in Sydney and called into Townsville. We picked up some infantry troops. As myself and Tony Sedges, another fixed-wing pilot with whom I shared a tent for the 12 months. Picked up the grunts in Townsville. We refueled in Darwin. Onto Singapore. It was a requirement, staging through Singapore, that we were not seen to be military. So our pre-em orders, we all had to have a civilian shirt or in our nice polyester dress uniforms. But whatever it was, 150 blokes had to put on a Hawaiian shirt or T-shirt or something to walk through the Singapore terminal and then straight into Tonsanut, Saigon. And that was just an eye-opener. Being aviators, Tony and I wanted to get up the front of the 707, and I hope none of these guys are still flying. They may recognise the incident, but we asked to get up the front, and there was a flight engineer. I think we had a second officer. There was a nurse, I recall. She got up there on her good looks. Sedges and I did not. And our major intent was just to try and listen to the radio traffic and try and familiarise ourselves. So we were on a fairly long final. In fact, we were about over Benoit, landing into the west at Tonsanut, and the regular first officer was standing behind, or sitting behind, I can't recall, but I know that there was an inexperienced guy in the right-hand seat driving the aeroplane on approach. And they missed a frequency. We went from an approach to the tower, and I happened to notice that we had one of the digits wrong. So we were about mid-final, I suspect. Clear weather day, absolutely no drama. And the old skipper, I remember, had ski gloves on, and very much an old man of the air, was the impression I got. So I'm at a dilemma. I didn't know whether to say, look, we're on the wrong frequency, and I thought I should say nothing. Not my aeroplane. So by the time I went back to the approach, we're now at about 3 mile final and we haven't got the gear out. And the aeroplane is sort of slipping through the air, at which stage I remember the skipper, in disgust, taking over, calling he was in command, and got the whole thing sorted out quite happily. But there was a lot of embarrassment, even from we poor Army aviators watching this exercise. The Army had evolved a basic airborne radio frequency surveillance role, where we would have a signals operator in the back. We'd run flights of typically 3 hours at about 3,000 feet, so we're out of harm's way, and just loitering around. And once enemy chatter was, they used to transmit mainly on HF. Once we could determine that transmission was occurring, we would do a series of triangulation in the most basic manner. Then we'd go back to base, and the signals guys would handle all that. It was a secret operation, not clandestine, but classified secret. And we were cleared to a fairly high order. We were not even allowed to discuss it with the chopper pilots. I'm sure they had some understanding, but our nickname or code name for the operation was Shush. So if anybody directed the conversation toward what we were doing, our answer was Shush. The detachments were started probably in 67 or 68 by one of my predecessing OCs. But Graham Hillsmith, my boss, was a fellow that I got immense respect for, tough nut, but very fair guy, and a very, very good aviator. He was both fixed and rotary wing qualified, and an instructor on both. So Hilly, as he was known, perhaps looking back it was to get rid of me, I don't know, but he detached me to the 54th Aviation Company, which is an American Army outfit down in Vung Tau, which is about 40 miles south of where our rubber plantation base was, and that was flying Otters. So I actually went solo in an Otter, sitting out in the boondocks there, which is a lot of fun. It's a big aeroplane. And flew for a month with them, mainly through the southern core, 4 Corps, which is south of Saigon. and we'd go to little hamlets and we'd be carrying chooks and peasants around. I don't quite know why we did it all, but we did. And I can remember the day that a man landed on the moon. We were out over the rice paddy, and we had to monitor quite a number of radios. We had HF, and I'm not sure whether we had UHF, but you'd have a VHF guard, an emergency frequency, FM for army traffic. You'd be having air traffic control from Saigon, so there's 3 or 4 radios being monitored. And we knew that this moon landing was about to happen, so I was listening on the NDB, or the ADF frequency, to AFVN, which is the Armed Forces Radio Network. And at the stage, just the critical stage, and it's crackling and what have you, but it was history in the making, so I wanted to listen to it. And we turned all the other radios down, just for a couple of minutes whilst the lunar module was getting down to 6 feet and 4 feet and so on and so forth. So the moment they'd landed, I cranked up the volume on everything, and our call sign was being, in somewhat anxious voice, "Big Daddy 5-4, what's going on?" And we re-established communication. And a Vietnamese bird dog had been shot down only 4 or 5 miles from us, and it was needing assistance. So we lumbered over there, 80 knots flat out, the old otter, and found the wreck in the rice paddy, and the 2 crew running for their lives, knee-deep in water. They escaped the crash unharmed, but they were near a village, and of course the villagers were rushing out toward them. Well, we didn't know whether the villagers were friendly or not. So if you can imagine, we had a crew chief in the back with a carbine, a single-shot carbine, and the old otter just rumbling around overhead, whilst somebody, I think we got a Huey in to extricate these 2 pilots. But that's my memory of the moon landing. It was quite funny. We had rations of beer put on us about Christmas of '69. There had been a few mishaps, and the task force commander decided that the limit of 2 cans per man per day should be strictly enforced. And as it was recorded in the book the other day that I read, Hillsmith determined that his ground crew, the engineers who worked all night repairing our aircraft and keeping them up, because we were doing a lot of flying, and he thought that we should be exempt, perhaps unofficially, from this beer restriction, and tasked me to fly Porter over to Phu Loy, which is about 100 miles from our base, and he'd made connection to an old US Army mate of his. He'd been in America on an instructor's course. So I flew in the stealth of night to Phu Loy, and we managed to find out that the Porter fuselage carries 91 cases of Budweiser. So we brought that back clandestine, and the excess beer was kept in the armoury. We figured we weren't supposed to be armed, nobody would do an inventory on us, and that all worked quite well. I had a dream run. Most of our fixed-wing people did the same sort of sorties as myself. We had a couple of secondments to American units, but certainly it was the best year of my life, I can say that categorically. And looking back, whilst there must have been hardships there, and we did lose pilots, we lost 3 in combat conditions, but I just see it as a Boy Scout camp. It was terrific. I shudder when I look at all these American, the Navy military shows, and I mean, they are fair dinkum today, and I'm certain that our Army and Air Force are. I mean, the sophistication of the equipment these days is nothing short of fantastic. But without wanting to seem like an old and bold, it was pretty basic and a lot of fun.